I swear I can still hear the clinking of glasses from that night, the sound echoing in my head like a cruel joke. The waiter had just refilled everyone's champagne when my husband, Daniel, stood up from his chair with that perfect, confident smile he always wore in public. The kind of smile that made people believe he had it all together. I used to believe it to it was his birthday, his big 40. I'd spent weeks planning the entire evening. The private rooftop restaurant, the live jazz band, the imported wines. Even the personalized menu embossed with his initials. It cost me over $8,000 and I didn't even blink. Because that's what you do when you love someone, right? You make them feel celebrated. You make them feel seen. Except that night, the only person who didn't feel seen was me. I remember holding my glass, waiting for his eyes to find mine. Waiting for him to thank me, maybe even pull me closer and tell everyone how lucky he was. But instead, he lifted his champagne, turned to the woman sitting 2 seats away and said, "To Rachel, my work wife, my rock, the one who always keeps me sane at the office. I couldn't do it without you." The table erupted in laughter and cheers. People clapped. Even Rachel, that perfectly polished woman with her glossy brown hair and effortless confidence, smiled modestly, pretending to brush off the attention while soaking in every drop of it. And me? I just sat there, frozen. I felt the heat crawl up my neck, my pulse hammering in my ears. I wanted to say something, anything, to laugh it off or make a joke, but the words wouldn't come. The moment stretched on forever and I could feel everyone watching me, trying to read my reaction. That was the thing about Daniel. He was the kind of man who loved admiration, not necessarily love, not loyalty, not connection. Just admiration. It fed him. It made him glow. And I'd spend years being his quiet cheerleader. The one behind the scenes making sure he always looked good. That night, I finally realized I wasn't his partner. I was his audience. When the waiter came by to pour more champagne, I looked at him and whispered, "No, thank you." My hands were trembling too much anyway after the toast. Daniel leaned over and kissed my cheek as if nothing had happened. "You okay, babe?" he whispered, smiling that charming, public smile again. "You look a little pale." I wanted to scream. I wanted to shove that smile right off his face. But instead, I just nodded and said softly, "I'm fine. Enjoy your night," and he did. Oh, he enjoyed it. He laughed, he danced, he told stories, while Rachel stayed close to close. They had inside jokes I didn't understand. When the cake came out, it wasn't me he fed the first bite to. It was her. By the time the dinner ended, the night air felt heavy and humid. My makeup felt like a mask, and my smile had become something I didn't recognize anymore. Daniel was drunk, happy drunk. The kind of drunk that made him affectionate but careless. He wrapped an arm around me as we waited for the valet, slurring, "You're the best wife ever. You really pulled it off tonight," pulled it off. Like it was some kind of event I'd produced for him, not something I'd done out of love. On the drive home, I stared out the window. The city lights blurring past like streaks of gold and white. He talked about how much fun he had, how everyone loved the venue, how Rachel was such a great sport. I said nothing. That silence must have bothered him. Because he finally asked, "What's wrong with you tonight? You've been weird since dinner." I turned my head slowly and looked at him. "Do you even realize what you did?" He frowned. "What are you talking about?" "The toast, Daniel. You toasted your work wife at your birthday dinner, the dinner I paid for," he scoffed. "Oh, come on, Lily, don't start. It was a joke. Everyone knows Rachel and I are just friends." "You're overreacting." I let out a small, bitter laugh. "You really think that's what this is? Overreacting?" He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "You always do this. You make something out of nothing. Can't we just have one night without drama?" And that's when I realized he wasn't even sorry. Not a bit. He didn't see what he did as wrong because, to him, I wasn't supposed to matter in those moments. I was supposed to support him, smile, and keep quiet. When we got home, he went straight to bed. Just like that. No apology. No acknowledgement. He fell asleep in minutes, snoring softly, while I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the floor. I didn't cry that night. Not one tear. Because something in me had shifted. I looked around our perfectly decorated bedroom. The place I'd designed. Paid for, filled with memories I thought were ours, and suddenly, it all felt hollow. That's when the thought came to me, calm and clear. Like a whisper, "You're done being the background character in his story." The next morning, when Daniel left for work, I made myself a cup of coffee, opened my laptop and started planning. Not for another dinner. Not for another celebration, for my revenge, and it wouldn't be loud or messy or dramatic. No, it would be quiet, elegant, and unforgettable, just like me. The next morning felt like any other. Sunlight poured through the curtains, the smell of coffee filled the kitchen, and Daniel's laughter echoed faintly through the phone as he chatted with someone from work. Probably Rachel. I watched him from across the kitchen island. The phone pressed against his ear, his other hand lazily flipping through emails on his tablet. He didn't even look up to say goodbye when he finally left for work. Just a quick, distracted, "See you tonight, babe," before the door shut behind him. I stood there, coffee cup in hand, and smiled to myself. A small, calm smile, because this time, I wasn't going to cry, or beg, or argue. I'd done all that before, years ago, when the first cracks in our marriage had appeared. The late nights, the client dinners, the vague text messages he'd guard like state secrets. I'd played the role of the forgiving wife. The patient one, but not anymore this time. I was going to teach him what it felt like to be invisible. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and started writing an email. Not to him. To his boss, Mark Callahan, the CEO of the company where Daniel worked. "Hi Mark, hope you're doing well. I wanted to reach out regarding the new marketing proposal Daniel mentioned. I've been reviewing some of the documents he brought home, and I noticed some inconsistencies in the figures and reports tied to the client budgets. I thought you should be aware before final approvals. Best, Lily Harper." I didn't hit send right away. I wasn't reckless, I was deliberate. I wanted to make sure everything I did was subtle, believable, and perfectly timed. Daniel had always underestimated me. He thought of me as the quiet wife who handled the house, managed the bills, and smiled at company events. What he didn't know was that for the last few years, I'd been running my own small business from home, a financial consulting firm. Numbers were my language, and I'd seen enough of his work projects to know that some of the things he and Rachel had been working on were creatively presented, but that email wasn't about revenge yet. It was just step one, planting doubt. Step two was reclaiming myself. That afternoon, I went out, not to run errands or buy groceries, but to get a haircut. A short, confident cut that made me feel like myself again. The stylist, a warm, middle-aged woman named Carla, smiled at me in the mirror. "Big change, huh?" she said, snipping away at my long hair. "Yeah," I said softly. "It's time." When I got home, Daniel noticed immediately. "Oh, you cut your hair?" "Yeah," I replied casually, setting down my purse. He stared at me for a second, clearly thrown off. "It's different, I know," I said, smiling faintly. "I like different." He hesitated, then shrugged. "Well, if you're happy, that's all that matters." That line, "if you're happy," had become his go-to excuse for not paying attention. But this time, I didn't feel hurt. I felt free. Over the next few days, I started pulling back. No more cooking his favorite meals. No more checking in on his meetings. No more waiting up for him when he came home late. At first, he didn't even notice. Then, he started to. One night, he came home around 9 p.m., loosened his tie, and looked around. "You didn't make dinner?" "No," I said simply, without looking up from my laptop. He frowned. "You always make dinner." "Not anymore." He blinked, confused. "Okay, what's going on with you?" I finally looked up and met his eyes. "Nothing. Just realizing I've been putting in effort where it's not appreciated." He stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Then he sighed and walked off to the bedroom. "You're being dramatic again, Lily." But I wasn't being dramatic. I was being strategic. The next week, Daniel had a work trip, a 3-day conference in New York. I didn't ask questions. I just smiled and helped him pack. Inside his suitcase, between his shirts, I placed a small envelope. Inside was a photo, not of us, of him and Rachel. One of the photos from his company's social event that he'd posted online months ago. The one where they stood too close, smiling too much. On the back of the photo, I wrote in neat cursive, "A toast I'll never forget." I didn't sign it. He'd find it on his trip. And when he did, I wanted him to wonder. Not panic, wonder. Because doubt, in the right dose, is far more powerful than confrontation. While he was gone, I met with Mark Callahan. I didn't tell Daniel about it. Mark had been impressed with my financial insight from that accidental email, and he invited me to consult for a short-term review project at the company. So, while Daniel was wining and dining in New York, I was quietly walking into his office, not as his wife, but as an independent consultant. The irony was delicious. When Mark introduced me to the team, Daniel's name came up. "You probably know Daniel Harper," Mark said with a grin. "He's one of our top guys." I smiled politely. "Yes, I've heard that." By the time Daniel returned, I'd already completed my review, and what I found was more than just inconsistencies. There were expense reports under Rachel's name that didn't add up. Overpriced dinners, unaccounted travel charges, and client budgets that had been adjusted just enough to raise eyebrows if someone looked closely. And I knew exactly how to make someone look closely. That night, when Daniel got home, I was sitting by the window sipping tea. He kissed my cheek and said, "Trip was great. Rachel and I crushed it." I smiled faintly. "I'm sure you did." He paused. "What's that supposed to mean?" Nothing, I said, turning back to my tea. Just. Interesting choice of words. He frowned but didn't push it because he had no idea. No idea that I'd already set the first domino in motion. This wasn't about destroying him overnight. That would be too easy and too obvious. No, this was going to be a slow, elegant unraveling. The kind that makes a man realize what he lost only after it's far too late to get it back. And as I watched him walk down the hallway that night, confident, oblivious, undeserving, I whispered to myself, "Happy birthday, Daniel." Asterisk. By the time Friday rolled around, I could feel the shift. Daniel had become restless, paranoid even. The kind of paranoia that creeps up on a man who's used to being in control, but suddenly can't figure out why the ground feels unstable beneath him. He'd been quieter at breakfast that morning, scrolling through his phone with that furrowed brow of his. Normally, he'd be humming, cracking jokes, checking the news. But that morning, silence. I sipped my coffee, pretending not to notice. Finally, he muttered, "Something's weird at work." "Oh?" I asked lightly. "What kind of weird?" He rubbed his temples. "Mark's been asking questions about expense reports, budgets." "I don't know. He called me into a meeting yesterday about some inconsistencies." I told him Rachel handles the reporting side, but he didn't look convinced. I lifted my mug and hid my smile behind it. "That sounds stressful." He glanced at me, almost suspiciously. "You think I should be worried?" I met his gaze, calm even. "Should you?" He didn't answer. It was fascinating, really, watching him unravel in slow motion. The same man who once lectured me about how calm under pressure he was, now pacing the kitchen like a trapped animal, and I didn't have to raise my voice, or threaten, or expose him. All I had to do was nudge. That afternoon, I went for a walk through the city. It was one of those crisp spring days in Chicago where the air smells faintly of coffee and rain, and everyone's in a hurry. I stopped by a small flower shop and bought white lilies, my namesake. They always made me feel grounded, pure. As I walked back, I thought about how much I'd given that man. 10 years of my life. 10 years of late-night takeout, last-minute work trips, quiet forgiveness. 10 years of convincing myself that love meant patience, even when it hurt. And in one night, one single toast, he'd made me realize that love without respect is just servitude dressed up in pretty words. When I got home, I saw his car already in the driveway, early. That was unusual. He was sitting on the couch, tie loosened, staring blankly at the TV, except the TV wasn't even on. I placed the lilies in a vase and said gently, "You're home early." "Yeah," he muttered. "Got sent home." I froze. "Sent home?" He looked up at me with that mix of anger and confusion that only guilty men wear well. "Apparently, there's an internal audit going on. Some of our accounts are being reviewed, Rachel's included. Mark told me to take the afternoon off while they sort things out." "Oh no," I said, masking the satisfaction that tried to creep into my voice. "That sounds serious." "Yeah, it is," he snapped. "You think I don't know that?" I raised a brow. "I was just being sympathetic, Daniel," he sighed, rubbing his face. "I'm sorry. I'm just frustrated. This is all Rachel's mess. She's been managing client expenses for months. If anyone's messed up, it's her." I tilted my head slightly. "You mean your work wife?" He froze. I watched the words sink in like a stone thrown into still water. He tried to smile, to laugh it off, but the tension in his jaw gave him away. "Lily," he said carefully, "can we not do this right now?" "Sure," I replied softly. "Whenever you're ready to talk about anything real, I'll be right here." I left him sitting there in silence, staring at the floor. That night, I lay awake beside him, listening to his breathing. Every sigh, every restless toss, it was the sound of a man losing control of his own story. And it was only the beginning. The next morning, he left early for the office. He didn't kiss me goodbye. He didn't even say a word, just grabbed his keys and left. I waited a full hour before picking up my phone and dialing a number I'd saved from my meeting with Mark, his assistant. "Claire." "Hi Claire, it's Lily Harper," I said sweetly. "I just wanted to check in. Did the audit finish?" "Oh, Mrs. Harper," she replied, lowering her voice. "It's still going. But between us, it doesn't look good. Mark's furious. There's talk that Rachel might be suspended. And Daniel's name came up in a few reports too. Apparently, there were dinners billed as client expenses that can't be verified." "Really?" I said softly. "That's surprising." "Yeah," she sighed. "I shouldn't even be saying this, but they're considering a full investigation. I guess even the golden employees aren't untouchable." I thanked her, hung up, and leaned back in my chair. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was accountability. For years, Daniel had built a reputation on charm and half-truths. Now, those truths were catching up, one file at a time. That evening, he came home late again. I could tell by the way he slammed the front door that the day hadn't gone well. He tossed his jacket on the couch and said bitterly, "Rachel's been suspended." I kept my tone even. "Oh, yeah, they think she misused company funds. But the thing is, I was with her on most of those trips. They're gonna think I was involved." I folded my hands in my lap. "Were you?" He glared at me. "What kind of question is that?" "A fair one," I said simply. He stared at me for a long time, like he couldn't decide whether to yell or beg. Then he said, "You don't understand. If they fire me over this, everything we've built, the house, the cars, our savings, it's all gonna crash." "Everything we've built?" I repeated quietly. Funny, I didn't realize we had anything left to lose. He looked like I'd slapped him. But the truth was, I hadn't even begun to fight yet. Later that night, I went into the home office while he showered. His laptop was on the desk, still open. I glanced at the screen, a string of panicked messages from Rachel. "They're blaming me. I swear, Daniel, I didn't touch those budgets. Mark said there's evidence someone logged into my account after hours. Was that you? Please tell me you didn't use my login." I felt something almost like pity, almost. Because the truth was, I didn't need to frame anyone. I didn't need to hack or fake a thing. The system had simply exposed what was already there: Daniel's carelessness, Rachel's complicity, their arrogance. All I'd done was hold up a mirror. When I turned off his laptop, I saw my reflection in the black screen, calm, composed, powerful. The woman who once begged for love was gone, and the one who replaced her? She was just getting started. Asterisk. By Monday morning, the house felt colder, quieter. Daniel hadn't said much all weekend. He spent most of it pacing around, calling his co-workers, sending desperate emails, and scrolling through his phone like a man trying to stop a flood with a paper cup. I watched him move through the house in silence, like a ghost haunting his own life. When he finally sat down across from me at the kitchen table, his face was pale, his eyes red from lack of sleep. "They suspended me," he said flatly. I looked up from my coffee, pretending to be surprised. "I'm sorry. What happened?" He let out a hollow laugh. "Apparently, the internal audit found some discrepancies under Rachel's account. And since I approved those reports, they think I was complicit. They're reviewing everything. I might lose my job." I set my cup down gently. "That's awful, Daniel." He stared at me for a long moment, searching my face for something, sympathy, maybe? But all he found was calm. That unnerved him more than anything else. "You don't even care, do you?" he said bitterly. "I care," I replied softly. "Just not the way I used to." He stood up abruptly, pushing the chair back. "You think this is funny? You think watching me go through hell is payback for a stupid toast?" My voice stayed even. "It wasn't the toast, Daniel. It was everything before it. Every time you made me feel like I didn't matter. Every time you looked right through me while chasing attention from someone else." He rubbed his forehead, pacing. "I didn't cheat on you, Lily. Maybe not physically," I said, "but emotionally? You left a long time ago." He didn't have an answer for that. He left the house shortly after, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frames on the wall. I didn't chase him. I didn't text. I didn't ask where he was going. I just sat there watching the sunlight shift across the kitchen floor, and felt, for the first time in years, at peace. Because I finally understood something: revenge doesn't always need chaos. Sometimes, the quietest retribution is simply letting someone destroy themselves with their own actions. Still, I wasn't done yet. That afternoon, I went to the office of my attorney, Vanessa Brooks, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who'd helped a friend of mine through a messy divorce. She greeted me warmly, but her expression shifted when I said Daniel's name. "I've heard of his company," she said. "Big marketing firm. Why, what's going on?" "I'm thinking of separating," I said calmly. "But not before I protect myself." We went over our finances, the joint accounts, the house deed, the investments. As it turned out, most of it was under my name. I'd been the one who built our savings from my business profits while Daniel spent freely, assuming the money would always be there. When Vanessa finished reviewing everything, she looked up at me and smiled slightly. "You've already done half my job for me. You're in a very strong position, Lily." I smiled back. "That's good to know." By the time I left her office, I felt lighter. I wasn't trapped anymore. When I got home that evening, Daniel was already there, sitting in the dark, a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the table. "Mark called," he said, his voice rough. "They're letting me go. No severance." Just like that, I stood by the doorway, my hands folded. "I'm sorry to hear that." He looked up sharply. "That's it? That's all you have to say?" "What do you want me to say, Daniel?" I asked softly. "That I warned you? That you built your life on people's approval and forgot how to value what mattered?" He slammed his fist on the table. "God, you're so cold. You used to care." "I used to," I said quietly. "And you used to see me." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was thick, filled with everything we'd never said. Then he looked at me with sudden suspicion. You've been distant ever since that night. What changed, Lily? Did someone tell you something? Did you do something? I tilted my head, meeting his gaze with steady calm. What could I possibly have done, Daniel? You were the one signing off on fake expenses. He stared at me, realization flickering in his eyes. You knew. I didn't answer. You knew about the audit, he said slowly. You knew, and you let it happen. Still, I said nothing. His expression hardened, anger and disbelief twisting together. You set me up, I finally spoke. No, Daniel. I simply stopped protecting you from the consequences of your own choices. He stood there, breathing heavily, looking at me like I was a stranger. You're not the woman I married. No, I said softly. I'm finally the woman I was supposed to be. He left again that night, slamming the door so hard it echoed through the house. I didn't follow. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat by the window, and opened my laptop. An email from Mark was waiting. Lily, thank you again for your insight during the audit. Your findings helped us prevent a major financial loss. If you're ever interested in joining the company full-time, we'd be honored to have you. I smiled. It wasn't just poetic justice, it was balance being restored. Over the next few days, I started packing away Daniel's things. His suits, his golf clubs, his framed certificates, all neatly folded into boxes. I stacked them by the door. I didn't do it out of anger. I did it out of closure. When he came home a few nights later, the first thing he saw were those boxes. What is this? He asked. It's your new start, I said gently. I think it's time we both moved on. He stared at me, eyes wide. You're kicking me out? No, I said, my tone calm and final. I'm setting you free. He looked around the house like a man realizing he'd already lost everything. Not because someone took it from him, but because he'd never appreciated it when he had it. And as he turned to leave, I said one last thing, not out of spite, but truth. You once toasted your work wife for keeping you sane, I said softly. I hope she's there for you now. He didn't look back. When the door closed, I exhaled. The house was quiet again, but this time it wasn't cold. It was peaceful. I wasn't Daniel's wife anymore. I was Lily Harper. And I was finally freed. The first morning without Daniel in the house felt quiet. Not the suffocating kind of silence that used to hang between us. This one was peaceful, clean. The kind of quiet that lets you breathe again. I made coffee, opened the windows, and let the sunlight flood in. The city felt different too, somehow brighter. Maybe it was just me, or maybe, for the first time in a long time, I was seeing it clearly. There was something liberating about realizing that I didn't have to revolve around someone else's chaos anymore. No more waiting for late-night calls. No more pretending not to notice lipstick smudges on his collar. No more fixing the emotional mess he left behind. This time, my energy was mine. I spent the next few days reorganizing the house, not to erase Daniel, but to reclaim my space. I replaced the heavy curtains he liked with sheer white ones. I donated half the furniture we'd picked together and filled the living room with plants and candles. Every little change felt like shedding another layer of the woman I used to be. It's funny how grief and freedom can coexist. Some nights, I'd catch myself staring at the empty side of the bed and feel a strange ache. Not because I missed him, but because I mourned the version of me who had believed in him so completely. But healing, I learned, isn't about forgetting what broke you. It's about remembering your worth in spite of it. 2 weeks later, I accepted Mark's offer. I started consulting for the company full-time, walking into that office for the first time as Lily Harper, financial consultant, not as Daniel's wife, was surreal. People knew who I was, of course. Whispers had spread. The woman who uncovered the audit that brought down 2 of the company's golden employees. Some pitied me. Others admired me. I didn't care either way. I wasn't there for gossip. I was there to rebuild. Mark greeted me warmly. Lily, I'm really glad you said yes. You have a rare eye for detail. We need more people like you. Thank you, I said, smiling genuinely. I'm glad to be here. It felt good, really good, to be recognized for my work, not for who I was married to. A few days into the job, I saw Rachel for the first time since the audit. She was in the lobby, collecting a box of her things. Her once glossy confidence had dulled. She looked smaller somehow, like all that arrogance had deflated into silence. Our eyes met for a second. She hesitated, then said quietly, Lily, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I swear, it wasn't like that with Daniel. I smiled politely. It's okay, Rachel. You don't owe me an explanation. Her shoulders slumped with relief. But I wasn't done. I just hope, I continued softly, that next time you toast someone, it's for something real. She blinked, confused, then looked away. As I walked past her, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt done. Truly done. The next few months were a quiet transformation. My work flourished. Clients trusted me. I bought myself a new car, not flashy, but sleek and strong like me. I took weekend trips to places I'd always wanted to see but never did. Because Daniel didn't like small towns now. I went wherever I wanted. One Saturday, I drove to Lake Geneva, rented a cabin, and spent the whole weekend writing not reports, but pieces of myself I'd forgotten. Dreams, ideas, plans. I even started journaling, something I hadn't done since college. On one of the pages, I wrote, "I don't need revenge to win. I just need peace. And peace comes when you stop letting the wrong people rent space in your soul." That line stayed with me. Then one evening, 3 months after Daniel left, I got a call. The number was familiar, but I hadn't seen it in a while. "Lily?" It was him. His voice was softer, hesitant. "Hi, Daniel, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from," he said quietly. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For everything. I lost my job. Rachel's gone. I moved into a smaller place. And I've had a lot of time to think." I didn't say anything. I let the silence sit. He took a shaky breath. "You didn't deserve any of it. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I was too stupid to see it." I swallowed. For a moment, I thought I'd feel satisfaction. But instead, I felt nothing. "Just peace." "Thank you, Daniel," I said gently. "I appreciate that. Do you think maybe we could talk sometime?" "Maybe." "No," I interrupted softly. "I think we've said everything that needed to be said." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he whispered, "You've changed." "I know," I said. "That's the point." When I hung up, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just smiled. Because closure doesn't always come with tears. Sometimes it comes with calm. That night, I went out to the balcony with a glass of wine and looked at the city lights. Chicago stretched before me, endless and alive, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. The woman who once paid for her husband's luxury birthday dinner while being humiliated in front of strangers was gone. The woman who replaced her, she didn't need validation or approval or revenge. She had something better, herself. A year, that's how long it had been since that humiliating night, the $8,000 dinner I paid for, where my husband toasted another woman as if I didn't exist. Now, standing in front of the mirror in my new apartment, I could barely recognize the woman staring back. Her hair was shorter, lighter. Her eyes, once dimmed by exhaustion and disappointment, now carried a quiet confidence. She looked alive. I adjusted my blazer and smiled at my reflection. Tonight wasn't about the past. Tonight was about everything that came after it. Mark had invited me to speak at a Women in Business networking event downtown, a gathering of entrepreneurs, investors, and leaders from across Chicago. When he first suggested it, I laughed. "I'm not exactly a motivational speaker," I'd said. He just smiled. "You're more than that, Lily. You're living proof of what resilience looks like." So I said yes. As I walked into the hotel ballroom, a soft hum of conversation filled the air. Glasses clinked, laughter rippled, and somewhere a jazz trio played something smooth and timeless. The event was elegant, not ostentatious like Daniel's birthday dinner, but graceful, intentional. Every detail whispered success, not screamed it. When it was my turn to speak, I stepped onto the small stage, the lights warming my face. Dozens of women looked up at me, some smiling, some curious, all waiting. I took a breath and began. "A year ago," I said, "I threw a luxury birthday dinner for my husband. I wanted to celebrate him, to show love, appreciation, partnership." That night, he stood up to make a toast. A soft murmur moved through the crowd. And instead of toasting me, he raised his glass to someone else. His work wife. A few gasps. A few sympathetic nods. "I won't lie," I continued. That moment broke something inside me. But looking back now, I'm grateful for it, because that was the night I stopped being an accessory in someone else's story and started writing my own. The room went still. I could feel the weight of the words hanging in the air. I learned that power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's silent. Sometimes it looks like walking away with grace instead of rage. Sometimes it's saying nothing because you know the truth doesn't need your defense. Time will take care of that. As I spoke, I thought of Daniel, of the phone call, the apology, the hollow regret in his voice. I thought of Rachel's slumped shoulders as she carried her box out of the office. And then, I thought of myself, sitting on my balcony that night, smiling into the quiet. Finally free. "I'm not here to tell you revenge is sweet," I said softly. "It's not. It's empty. But peace is priceless. And peace comes when you stop fighting for a seat at a table where you're no longer respected, and build your own instead." The audience was silent. Then, one woman in the back started clapping. Another followed. Within seconds, the whole room was on their feet. As I stepped down from the stage, Mark caught my eye and gave a proud nod. Later that night, after the event, I stood outside the hotel, the cool Chicago wind brushing against my skin. The city lights reflected in the glass buildings around me, vibrant, alive, endless. I checked my phone, a few congratulatory messages, a missed call from an unknown number. I didn't need to guess who it was. I put the phone back in my purse. Some doors stay closed for a reason. Across the street, I saw a young couple laughing as they walked hand in hand. For a moment, I felt a pang of nostalgia, not for Daniel, but for the version of love I once believed in. Then I smiled. Because love wasn't gone. It was just changing shape, and maybe one day, when it finds me again, it'll be with someone who doesn't need to be reminded of my worth. Someone who'll toast to me not because I bought the dinner, but because I earned it. As I walked toward my car, the wind picked up, carrying with it the faint hum of city traffic and the rhythm of 1,000 untold stories. When I reached home, I took off my heels, poured myself a glass of red wine, and curled up by the window. My journal lay open on the table beside me. I picked up the pen and wrote. I used to think revenge would make me feel strong, but forgiveness made me free. And freedom, real freedom, is the sweetest revenge there is. I closed the journal, set it aside, and exhaled slowly. Outside, the moonlight danced across the city skyline. Inside, peace filled the quiet spaces of my heart. I had finally learned that sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is walk away without looking back.